Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Hoodwink. So Hoodwink is one of those classic heroes that seem to be designed as a support, but has enough carry-esque abilities that people have tried to play her in almost all the roles, literally all the roles. Like 1 through 5 she's been able to play to some extent. Maybe carry's not as popular, but still, she pretty much can play almost any role. But since the map expanded a year ago or so, we've pretty much been only seeing her as a support and more as a 4 position, because the reason why that is because she can play a support but also a core role in some sense. The 4 position has kind of developed into this 4th core. So unless some patch in the future just reduces a lot of the farm on the map, or there's some way that it changes everything to be, you know, just back to those 3 cores, the 4 position has become almost like a damage dealing carry again, and Hoodwink is perfect for that role because she offers a little bit of control, a little bit of support for her team, a break in her ultimate, just all these little things that help as a support. But then also she has kind of an ability that scales with right clicks, which is always going to be amazing for any kind of core hero, any kind of ability where you want to just add a lot of right click damage and get items that help, you know, buff that up or power that up. So Hoodwink is perfect for that. Just does a little bit of everything, also has some escape. So she is just one of these heroes that, because she's a newer hero, it just seems like this happens with newer heroes, has like a ton of different things in her kit that allows her to be very dynamic as a hero. A lot of things are straightforward, but there is a decent skill ceiling because of how many different things and how dynamic this hero can be. But before we understand how to play Hoodwink, let's take a look at her abilities. Now that we understand Hoodwink in general, we can take a look at her abilities and see how she's able to be that good dynamic hero that plays support but can also scale with right clicks like I talked about. So first we're going to take a look at Acorn Shot. Pretty straightforward ability in one sense, in that really you just click it on an enemy. So put these axes close together, and when you click it on that enemy, it kind of shoots this acorn out that bounces between enemies and creeps and all that kind of stuff. So this is really good for harassing and farming. But obviously, because of the bouncing, it's sort of like any other bouncing ability, like Lich Ultimate or Cask from Witch Doctor, where there's a range, so it's not just obviously going to bounce to an infinite enemy at any range. So you can see if I just press this on the axe there, it doesn't really do that much. So to get the most bang for your buck in terms of mana and all that kind of stuff, you want to make sure there's multiple enemies or creeps in that area that you're going to be using this ability. But then at the same time, if you want to use this to harass mainly, you would probably rather use it in the same way with like a Witch Doctor. If you want to chain stun somebody, it'd be better to use it when there's only like 2 enemies and there's no creeps around, because then obviously you're getting the most bounces and you're getting the most damage out of the hero that you can. So that's Acorn Shot's basic way to use it. But then the actual other thing you can do is, if you actually place it on the ground, it will actually create a tree and then also bounce to enemies. So that's important because of the next ability that actually combines with the ability. But just briefly before I move on to that, I want to let you know that you can actually right click this Acorn Shot. It changes the look of it a little bit, and then you actually can't really click it on an enemy because it will always make a tree even if you click it right on that axe. And that's important because, like I said, of this next ability, Bushwhack, which is pretty straightforward. You just press it near a tree and then it shoots out this this little whatever bushwhack thing. What is it called? I forget what it's called. They're like the kind of the same thing that Ember Spirit has. Anyway, whatever. I'm gonna forget. You guys can leave in the comments whatever it is called. But it sends out one of these things that basically stuns people in an area. And so that's why you might want to do this, because if you're just out in the open like this and there's no trees, this bushwhack is just going to do nothing. So I can just, you know, you see the little animation, but nothing really happens. So obviously if the axe is over here, the enemy's over here near the tree, then it'll grab the tree and like pull him towards it. But if you want to use this in the open, that's why you kind of right click this, or you just click it on the ground and then you use the bushwhack, and then there you go, the axe is now stunned up against the tree. And you can also use it for multiple enemies. So you can see the AoE isn't huge, but if you can get both of these in that AoE, you can stun multiple heroes at a time if they're in that AoE around the tree. So this is really good, obviously, in the laning stage where there's a lot of trees in the laning stage for the most part. Not as good in like the mid lane, for instance, where there's not as many trees around the lane and the river and all that kind of stuff. So it just depends on the places on the map, but there are a lot of trees in Dota, so usually you're going to be able to use this ability to some extent around team fights and trees and all that kind of stuff. But then, like I said, there is a way that you can make sure you can get the stun off, but it's just not as reliable as some of the other stuns in the game. So that's Bushwhack. And also does damage as well, like obviously. Then next we have Scurry. This is a pretty straightforward ability. It's a defensive ability. Basically, you can just tree walk through all the trees, which is pretty cool. It also, I have it on free right now, but if I take it off, you can see there's multiple charges, which is good as well. So this just allows you to get extra move speed to go through the trees, to kind of escape, weave in and out, to be a lot harder to kill. It can be very, very annoying. You also get evasion as well, so it's just a little bit of an extra thing where like people are trying to right click you, you're running away, you're going through trees, they have a hard time catching up, and if they click you, it doesn't even matter as much because you're just dodging half the attacks. Not half, obviously. You can see the evasion is pretty high though. I mean, that's a decent amount of evasion for just this ability that gives you this extra escape, so you're very survivable in that way. Because this hero generally has low HP overall, you don't really build HP items on the hero either. It's just really not what you do, so you're extremely squishy. So it's the one thing that allows you to kind of escape in and out and not just like be blown up. Obviously magic damage still does a lot to you as well though. So that's Scurry, pretty straightforward ability, but can be very effective, just an extra thing on the hero that makes it more dynamic, like I talked about. And then lastly, we have the Sharpshooter ability, the ultimate. And this is almost like an afterthought, I think, for a lot of people, but it does a decent amount of damage. So basically what happens is you click it, and you can kind of click it in a direction, and then you start charging up, and you can actually aim it here. And after it counts down all the way, then you release this big arrow that kind of shoots through the crossbow, and then it like kind of has a pretty long range. So actually, let's just go over here, and you can see, I'll just click it over here. You can see the range. That's pretty far. And now at any time, you can see I released it there a little bit early, and that is another thing you can do as well, because you charge it up. It actually does more damage the longer it charges, and then if you just want to release it at any time, you can do so. So you can see I didn't charge it up as much. It didn't do nearly as much damage, and it still broke. And then the other thing to consider is that the debuff scales up to 3 seconds. So after 3 seconds, it's actually fully charged. So, it says 5 seconds there. So once you're down to 2, now I can just release it at any time, and it does max damage and break and duration and all that kind of stuff. So just keep that in mind. So it's not like you have to wait. Like an Alchemist stun, I believe that stun just goes all the way down to like the very end, and then it scales for the entire time. It's not exactly like that, because after 3 seconds, then it's to its max potential, so you don't have to worry about it. You can just try to aim it then and make sure you actually hit it. But it is a relatively decent skill shot, because it's not like the fastest thing. It's not as fast as Power Shot from Wind Range or anything like that. So you do need to make sure that it is a little bit better to be closer. Sometimes you're firing it from like fog and stuff like that. People try to dodge it and weave in and out like they do with Power Shot or Hook or anything like that. So it is a bit of a skill shot. And then we can actually talk about the Shard, because this is an ability that people actually use, which is a boomerang. So you toss a boomerang in an arc, so I can aim it at an enemy, and it like gives them this little mark, this little debuff, slowed and taking increased spell damage. You can also kind of like just go in an AoE here, like close to you or far away. It has a decent range, so if I just aim it over there, it can hit this axe and multiple axes. So keep that in mind. It's not like it only hits one hero. Let me try to hit multiple heroes. Yeah, you can see if you kind of aim it in between them. So it's a little bit of a skill shot there, or if you just want to get one guy, you can just aim it on that guy. And it's pretty straightforward from there. It obviously follows you as well because it comes back. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind. And then you do more spell damage. This is a spell, by the way. And then this is also a spell. And then this is also a spell. So just keep that in mind. Kind of amps up everything that this hero does. Although this obviously scales with right clicks as well, which is why you're going to be building a lot of right click damage on the hero. And then if you want to learn about the Ags, you can actually just get the Ags and test it out yourself. Nobody buys this Ags. This Ags is very bad right now, so maybe I'll remake this guide when they remake this Ags, because this Ags is not going to be bought ever. It's going to be remade. Hey, maybe it will still be this decoy. I don't know, but they're just not. Nobody buys it. It's useless. It's just not something you really care about. You can get it late game, sure, but whatever. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. So that's Hoodwink. Those are her abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how she's played. Now, Hoodwink's landing stage is pretty straightforward. It's not that complicated because she's just going to be focusing on right-clicking the enemy with her good range, good attack animation. She has decent speed. The Acorn Shot also scales with right-clicks, obviously, so you're going to be buying that Blightstone early on all the time to just amp up that harass damage. And then you can use your Bushwhack to stun multiple enemies, or, they're always going to be playing in trees to some extent. You're going to be pulling camps and contesting pulls and doing all that kind of stuff in the side lanes where there's trees everywhere all the time. Yeah, maybe you might need to spawn a tree here and there in the lane when you're trying to stun somebody in the creeps, but even when they're like retreating away or trying to fight, there's always going to be some moment where people are near trees, so that can be very straightforward and very obvious there as well. And then Scurry uses trees as well, so you can kind of dodge in and out if they're trying to go on you, trying to harass you, trying to kill you. You can kind of escape in that way where I mean, Tree Ant is pretty much the only other hero that's going to be like good at that, or be able to chase you down in the trees. So keep, be careful of that matchup, or maybe something like Bat Rider as well. You need to be careful of that. But still, you're very good at kind of weaving in and out, contesting, doing a lot of damage. Now, the only thing I would say that you really need to consider early on is when you're using your Acorn Shot, because kind of like I showed in those abilities, you don't want to use it just on an enemy that's like alone. You also don't really want to use it in the lane, because if you use it in the lane, it's going to be bouncing on all the creeps, pushing the wave, which isn't always good, unless you're going to pull. Like, you can strategically do that, just harass the carry, maybe have a couple bounces here and there, but then that can be dangerous because maybe that'll put the range creep and deny range or something, which isn't really good, so it can grief a little bit, but then obviously push the lane to pull it back. There's all these different things you can consider, but really the ideal situation is, let's say there's a support trying to pull and there's one creep left in the camp, and you can kind of like shoot that Acorn Shot out, and then it hits the enemy hero and it hits the creep and it bounces back and forth a bunch of times. Very, very similar to the cask from Witch Doctor. You just want to be kind of considering when you're casting it, and yeah, sometimes you can get lucky or whatever, and then it can bounce multiple times on the enemy, but still, you just want to make sure that you're not like using it, wasting it, that kind of thing. And that's really the main consideration, the main complicated thing, which really isn't that complicated in the laning stage for Hoodwink. Then mid-game, you're really a jack of all trades kind of hero. I mean, like I said, it's very dynamic. You do a little bit of everything, so you're pretty good at like clearing through waves. Maybe not the best, but you definitely can just sit yourself in front of a safe lane or off lane tower or whatever and just farm, make sure that people aren't pushing that tower. Even mid, you can definitely do that, even though there's not as many trees, but it's definitely something you can do, and you can do it pretty effectively because of your ability to kind of escape through the trees with your scurry, and that's something the hero can do. The hero can also just, run around the map ganking. That's a possibility because of your damage and your stun. You also are really good with your ultimate with a break. So like if there's a bristleback on the enemy team or something like that, some hero that's really tanky that you just need to bring down with that slow and that break, you also can do that as well. So I think in like a game where there are one of those heroes, you want to make sure you are participating more and not just kind of like farming on your own. Although obviously, I always say the lower MMR you are, the more you should farm. But this hero can do a little bit of everything in that way. So it is very dependent on the game, dependent on what your teammates are doing, dependent on what you think needs to happen in the game, what you're going to be doing after that laning stage ends. Then in terms of team fighting, you're kind of doing two things in the fight. And I mentioned the one already, which is, if there's a bristleback or some other hero that needs to be broken by your ultimate, you definitely want to be using that. And you can kind of combo that up with the bushwhack, bushwhack that hero, and then use your ultimate to secure the break. Because, breaks can be hard to come by these days, and it also depends on whether Silver Edge is a good item or not, too. Like, sometimes it's a good item, it's bought a lot. Sometimes it's a really bad item, and it's not bought that often. But still, just having that reliable, not necessarily 100% reliable, but good break on your team, making sure you hit it sometimes is more important than actually, like, getting the damage out. And so that's the thing to consider later on in the game, is, like, are you really relying on that ultimate? And if you're not, it could just be that added bonus. And then if you are scaling up into the later portion of the game with items like your Maelstrom, or even Gleipnir, or your crit, which you eventually can get Daedalus on the hero. That's literally a 4-position item that you can buy on the hero, and it's not griefing. At least right now, who knows, maybe in the future it is. But still, then you're kind of almost playing like a Slark in a way, because Slark, what he likes to do is he likes to jump in, get a bunch of stacks, people kind of commit some abilities and spells on him, he gets a little bit low HP, maybe he pops his ultimate, or maybe he jumps out with his other pounce and then kind of goes back, regens back up, comes back in full HP because it's really hard to bring him down. Hoodwink is kind of similar in that. She doesn't have the regen, but she kind of pops in from the trees, kind of like, oh, hey, here I am, uses all of her abilities, then she doesn't really do anything, so then you kind of run away again, and then you kind of wait for them to come off cooldown, and you come back in, use your abilities again, get a bunch of damage off again. You just be this super elusive, annoying hero that's just kind of constantly popping back in and out of the fight, doing a bunch of damage, and you can really be effective. If you can get multiple volleys of your spells off in a fight, and you have good items, like, you're going to win that fight. That's really, honestly, just that straightforward, because you can actually do insane damage, and you can get, like, a couple bushwhacks and a couple Acorn Shots, or maybe even 3 of them off in, like, a prolonged fight. I mean, you're going to be doing a ton of damage, and you're going to really win fights that way. And then finally, late game, like, once you actually get all those items and it's super ultra late game, that's kind of the one time where I feel like you might not want to just go in and out. You actually kind of want to maybe right-click them like a real right-clicker, because you actually do insane damage. So there are those times later on in the game when you do have all those items that you don't want to just retreat and rely on your abilities. That's kind of more like those team fights in the mid-game, or you might have some items and you do good damage, but you don't really just like want to sit there right-clicking a guy because you're just too squishy, you don't have as much survivability, and you're not doing as much damage for it to be worth it. It's more worth it for you to survive a little bit. But late game, it can totally be worth it for you to right-click people and just stand there and stand your ground a little bit, especially with the evasion that you could potentially have. And then lastly, Hoodwink isn't a very hard hero conceptually, honestly, but there are little quirks about the hero. Like, you can use your ultimate with that little kind of jump back that happens. I don't know if you saw that in the abilities portion of the guide, but it kind of like pushes you back a little bit. You can actually use that very quickly to kind of like go over cliffs and then run away. Like, you can use all these little things to make your hero even more survivable and do little cute stuff like that. You can also hit your bushwhacks pretty reliably. You can kind of like send the bushwhack out and then send the acorn out in a way that actually like reliably hits it and very quickly before the enemy can actually use a quelling blade on your tree, which can happen, by the way. If they see the tree coming out, they can just kill the tree, or even the tree that they're getting stunned to, they can kill that. So you need to kind of be better at actually hitting those and hitting them from fog and all those kinds of things. So even though conceptually it's a pretty straightforward hero, it is very dynamic, like I talked about. It does a lot of things, so knowing when to do those things, and then also understanding those little nuances, those little skill cap, the high skill cap stuff about the hero can take some time, can take some experience, and you can definitely have a lot of impact with this hero. I think it's a very, very good, reliable, and effective 4 position. If you're looking for a support to play, I definitely recommend Hoodwink. And that, everyone, is my Hoodwink guide. If you liked the video and found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.